What I want to talk to you today about is safety for emergency workers, and what I'm talking about is just a different way for us to look at safety. So I'm going to tell you about a friend of mine, I met him, Constable John Petropoulos, and I met John in October of 1996. And what happened was when we joined the police service, as we do in all jurisdictions, we started in a training academy. So John and I were assigned together to training academy here in Calgary. John sat beside me. John's a big Greek guy. He was one of the older people in the class, as was I, and we got along very well. We graduated our academy in 1997, and we got sent out to our district to work as patrol officers. So I'll tell you a little bit more about John. John had tried to become a police officer quite a few times, so he had a lot of tenacity. Back then, when we applied to the police service, there were thousands and thousands of people that applied, and so it was fairly common not to get hired right away. And he applied, and they would say, sorry, go back and get some more education. So he'd go and get more education. He'd apply again, they'd say, sorry, some other issue, and he'd go and he'd fix that issue. So he was very happy to be a police officer. He wanted to be a police officer. He wanted to work in Calgary as a Calgary cop, and he was very good at it. And one of the things that he was good at is he appreciated his job. He appreciated this community. And so he worked hard. Now, he had ambitions. His ambitions, it looked like that he was probably going to head towards undercover work. He enjoyed that aspect of policing. He was very good with people. He found it very easy to make informants and have people talk to him. Now, that all changed on September 29, 2000. I'll tell you what happened. John had just come back from holidays. His wife, Marianne Pope, who you'll hear from in a few minutes, and John went on holidays, and they came back from holidays. It was first shift back. Now, here's what happens generally. At the end of our shifts, we kind of wait for the day shift. So it was a night shift. We wait for the day shift to take the calls. John, there was a warehouse in Calgary, and what happens is an employee shows up early in the warehouse to open up the warehouse. When the employee shows up, he notices that there is a hole in the brick wall on the exterior of the warehouse. He's not sure what caused it, but he notices a hole. When he goes in to open up the warehouse, he hears an alarm. So you have an alarm going off, you have a hole in the wall, so he calls 911, which is a good call. So we do what we do, and we all show up. And what we did as police officers is we contained that building. So we have officers on the outside of the building in case there's an offender inside, and if there's somebody inside, then we'll contain them and we'll arrest them when they come out. We then send a canine unit in along with patrol officers to search the inside of that premise. Now, it was a large warehouse. The lights are off. It's dark outside. And so they go through with the dog and they search that premise. Now, I want to remind you that, again, they're searching the premise looking for a subject, looking for somebody that has broken in and is in there. And they search the main floor and they don't find a subject. Now, there's a mezzanine level, and the mezzanine level has some stairs. John had been walking with the canine unit and backing up the canine unit as they search the main level. So they get to the mezzanine level. John goes up by himself. It's a little bit easier than having the dog go up there. So John goes up to the mezzanine level. So if I can paint you a bit of a picture, it is dark. You have an alarm going off that's annoying. They've already searched the main floor and they've found nothing. And John has what we all have, which is a flashlight. So he has a flashlight. Now, he's not going camping, looking down at the ground to figure out where he's walking, like you're camping, trying to find a place to go to the washroom. He has his flashlight up. He's looking for a subject. And what John does is, with his flashlight while he's looking for a subject on that mezzanine level, he does this. And if you missed it, I'll do it again. He did this. He took a step and he died. Now, what John didn't know, nor would any of us know, nor would anybody else going into that premise in the middle of the night know, is that this was a safe place to stand. This was a false ceiling. That particular company chose not to put a safety rail up to warn people that this was a safe place. This was not a safe place. Now, John fell about 10 feet. Now, the ironic part about it is that a 10-foot fall probably wouldn't even trigger a lights and siren response from EMS. Paramedics likely wouldn't even respond lights and siren for a 10-foot fall. 10-foot falls will probably mean that you've maybe broken an ankle, maybe sprained something, but that's probably about it. You know how our mom and dads always tell us to push in the chair when we're done at the table? So what none of us knew was that underneath that mezzanine level was a lunchroom. The people that had eaten in the lunchroom that day didn't push in the chair. And so as it turns out, when John fell, his legs caught the back of the chair, flipping him and the chair, and John fell and smashed his head on the ground and died. So I'll tell you, from a law enforcement perspective, from a friend perspective, from a classmate perspective, it was quite frustrating. It's quite frustrating because what we had and what we heard was lots of people saying, oh yeah, those are the dangers of being a first responder. And I gotta, to be real honest, that kind of pissed me off, because that isn't the danger of being a first responder. There are dangers, and we see it every day in this community. We see it every day in other communities where we have firefighters that are responding to a fire and going into the fire while the rest of us are running out. We see every day in this community and others where we have police officers that are responding to gunfire or other active assailant type situations while everybody's running away. Those are the inherent dangers of law enforcement or of firefighters. At the end of the day, we don't dictate where our job site is. Our job site could be your home, it could be the side of the street, it could be a school, it could be this warehouse. So from our perspective, there were three of us that were in John's class, and we decided that that wasn't good enough for us. It wasn't good enough to have people say, yeah, that's just what happens, too bad, bury him, let's move on. So what we did was we started the John Petropoulos Memorial Fund, and you'll hear a little bit about that through some of the videos here. But what we thought we would do is try to educate our community about how to make it a little bit safer for emergency service workers. So if you think about, for those that have children, if you think about what happens when you first have kids and you're told to get down on your hands and knees and crawl around like a child and see what kinds of stuff they can get into. So 7 years ago when I had kids and I did that, I went, holy crap, I had no idea there are all these dangers way down there. That's really what we're talking about, is if you think about what your school, what your workplace, what your house looks like in the middle of the night, perhaps with an alarm going off. What does that look like for emergency service workers? What does that look like for firefighters, for police, for EMS? What does that look like, quite frankly, for an electrician that has to come in, or ATCO or NMAX, or somebody else that has to come in the middle of the night to your school or premise? So what we did was and I'll show you some of them here. What we did was we developed some public safety announcements. Some of them you may have seen. There's some new ones that I'll show you here. And as well, what we did was we developed a 10-minute video on safety. And it's around safety, again, in those premises that we may be called to assist. And it's everything, I want you to think about not just darkness, that's part of it, but it's everything from, are we blocking an emergency exit? So firefighters will only have a finite amount of air when they're going into a burning premise or a place that has gas. And if they're trying to get out in a hurry, do we have an emergency exit that's been blocked off? And I know why. Lots of times it's because it's convenient. Nobody ever uses that exit. And we've seen that in Calgary, and we've seen, unfortunately, some really tragic circumstances because of that. So this isn't to depress you, but I do want, this is the reality. So I'm going to show you this first video, and I'll tell you about this first video. This was, you can tell that this is our budget video. This was our first one that we did. You may have seen it. You will see John, a picture of John graduating from recruit class. John was, again, very proud to be a police officer. So.
Once there was a girl and a guy who fell in love, got married, and were very happy together. He became a police officer, his lifelong dream. Then, one night, while investigating a break-and-enter, the fairy tale ended when he fell through a false ceiling because there was no safety railing in place. To learn how to make your workplace safe for everyone, visit jpmf.ca.
What is it you think we're doing?
24 hours a day, emergency services personnel work hard to save lives and make our roads safer. Please give us room to work and slow down, because it's no picnic out here.
So you guys have heard of rubberneckers? So I get it. There's nothing we can do about that. Everybody wants to slow down and stare at what we're doing. I get it. So this was our cheeky response to that. It isn't a picnic. Again, we don't determine where these incidents take place. We just go to them. Even when we think about traffic stops that we conduct, we can determine, and we do determine when we're going to initiate that traffic stop. What we don't determine is where people pull over. We don't determine where the car crashes are. We don't determine what building we're going to go to. So this was our response. What we did was we go to EMS. We then wanted to address, again, similar to this, but we wanted to address the driving.
Rush hour traffic and construction site that we'd get out of the road.
So I can tell you that I don't think I've spoken to an emergency responder yet that doesn't say the most frustrating thing is trying to get to a call quickly and safely, and having somebody not yielding, or somebody that doesn't know what to do and they panic or they slam on the brakes, or they're on their phone. I know we have laws now that nobody's on their phone, so we never see that anymore, right? Well, people are on their phones and they're not paying attention, and so it is super frustrating. So again, we don't dictate where those emergencies are, but we wanted to try to show people that if you're not paying attention when you're driving, it does impact not only us, but the people we're trying to help. And I would argue that, certainly from my experience, it's not just the people we're trying to help, it's their family and loved ones as well. So when we talk to firefighters about what is the thing that probably causes them the most concern around some of these premises, it really is that. It really is somebody storing things in a place they shouldn't, blocking an emergency exit so they can't get out if they need to get out. And then police. So this next one is the police one. You will see, you'll see incredible actors, first of all. I might be one of them. But you will see John's story. So what happened at the warehouse? Well, somewhere during that afternoon before the workers showed up early to open up, a forklift accidentally hit the wall and caused a hole in the wall. The alarm, when that worker went to unlock the building, the alarm was an alarm. I don't know. We don't know what caused the alarm. just like most of our places. We go to lots of we used to go to lots of false alarms. Law enforcement still does. So we have, so again, all of this materials is available to you. We did develop 3 other quick 30-second PSAs, which I'll show you here real quickly. Really, they were geared towards, we brought in some students, and they were geared towards some students, primarily at the high school level, where we're trying to, and you know this, really, if we want to affect change in people, we need to start early. So these particular public service announcements were to have people think, and to for us to be able to engage in conversations with some of our high school students.
Next week, my girlfriend will respond to a break and enter at a restaurant with a poorly lit stairwell. The spill at the top of the stairs will cause her to fall down the entire flight.
Protect those who protect you. Find out more by visiting jpmf.ca.
Tonight, my dad will respond to a fire. The building's emergency exit will be blocked, and he won't get out.
Protect those who protect you. Find out more by visiting jpmf.ca.
Tomorrow, my mom will be helping a family involved in a traffic collision. A distracted driver will not see her or the crash scene.
Protect those who protect you. Find out more by visiting jpmf.ca.
I would say this, that what I'm talking about here today isn't unique to Calgary. When we present down, including down in the United States, it's the exact same issues and challenges there. And it really is about, I think, my opinion, I'm biased, I get it, I'm the cop, but it's my opinion that it's a community issue. That what we need to do is we need to be to looking out for each other.
What sort of fines were levied against the warehouse?
What fines were levied against the warehouse? So it's a great question. So I would say this. I'm biased. I'd say this, that no fine was worth it. So I would say, and I'll tell you what we're doing with the Calgary Police Service, is now we're working with occupational health and safety. So this is new to the province. And certainly when we researched it a few years back, nobody in Canada was doing this, no law enforcement was doing this. But what we're now doing is any time in Calgary where we have an occupational health and safety death, we have an occupational health and safety life-altering injury. So I know that may seem vague, but we do have policy around what that is. Police detectives are now being dispatched to that scene to investigate as well. And in some cases, I think what we might find is we might find that there's some criminal negligence that takes place. So it is no longer just a fine. Bring your minds back, unfortunately, to a little girl, Michelle Kursk, that was killed when debris went flying off of a building downtown. That was a very thorough investigation, both by Occupational Health and Safety and the police, and at the end of the day, that company was fined thousands of dollars. I gotta tell you, who cares? That's not worth it. We have a dead little girl, we have a family that, that's impacted by that, so. The Darren Leggett, the canine officer that was there, he's a hero. He performed that first aid on John. Obviously John died, but that first aid enabled us to get John to the hospital. And John ended up becoming organ donor for a bunch of people. So it's not to scare people, but I just want people to know that at the end of the day, there is a person attached. The stuff about how the injury happened, that's the reality. That's what people are going to see. That's what we see.
People think about workplace safety from the perspective of like a police officer or a firefighter or an EMS, basically putting themselves in their boots, then hopefully they will make changes in their lives or in their businesses or as their driving habits that will help ensure that those people get home safely.
Your job environment or your warehouse or your workplace is very, very familiar to you to the point where you don't see anything anymore. You don't see hazards, you don't, or you're aware of a hazard so much that it's become part of something you know that you have to avoid. Step over this, push that way, lift this out of the way first. We don't know that.
When we come into a building, our expectation is that as by the code and our inspections provide, is everything safely stored, stocked away, clean, and responsibly kept.
The employers and the workers have to understand that safety rules and regulations are in place to make the worksite safe for everybody. The ramifications, because they don't follow those safety rules and regulations, could be, illness, injury, accident, or loss of life.
We're also trying to shatter those myths that when a police officer or a firefighter or a medic or a paramedic dies in the line of duty, oh, that's too bad. That's part of the risk they sign on for the job. What we're trying to say is, yeah, there's a lot of risks, but there's a lot of ways that communities can minimize those risks. So that's part of the educational message that we're trying to get out there, is that a lot of these fatalities and injuries and near misses, they are preventable. Around 5:30 in the morning of September 29th, John responded to a warehouse, and he'd gone. He was working with Constable Lil Hall that evening. That was his partner.
I was working with John Petropoulos the night of the accident. We attended an alarm call, basically. I was a regular patrol officer at the time, and I ran to the back to contain a man door. Other officers met me back there, and John Petropoulos waited to meet the canine officer who he attended with inside the building to clear it.
I remember entering the premise and starting the search methodically with John at my side, letting my police service dog Gino lead us through the building. We needed to send somebody up to a second level mezzanine to ensure that nobody had accessed or had taken refuge. We more or less changed roles. I was there to protect him as he ascended a small ladder. And I remember him advancing towards an area that got a little bit darker. And much to my disbelief, as I saw John advance along the wall, I saw him disappear.
We heard the canine officer get on the air and state that someone had fallen. We then managed to get inside the building, and it was dark in there, which was, we're still trying to make radio contact. We're trying to figure out where they are in the building. When we got on scene, we observed the accident.
It didn't dawn on me right at that moment in time that he had actually slipped through a false ceiling. He was in a coffee room. He was laying on his back. He didn't appear to be breathing. His eyes appeared to be open, and he wasn't moving.
It was my point to go and find lighting, which was difficult. I had to make a few laps around the building trying to find the lights. We got the lights on, and members were performing CPR on my partner at that time. As I conducted an inspection, I realized that John had a huge gaping hole in the back of his head, which had obviously hit the hard marble floor that existed in a coffee room. I bundled up my shirt. I used it as a compress and a place for at least to stop whatever bleeding was occurring at the time. And I remember the gravity of this hit me at the scene when the emergency medical services personnel arrived on the scene and looked right at me and said, "You better call your chief." It was a hard night. It was the hardest night I've ever had as a police officer.
It ended up there was no one in the building, there was no intruder in there, so John died protecting a premise that did not need protecting. John's death could have easily been prevented. If a safety railing had been in place as per the law, then John would still be here today.
The employer is required by legislation across, I would say, North America to assess the worksite hazards.
Good housekeeping is definitely an important part of the overall process. If a business fails to keep their extinguishers active, or they store debris, or there's trip hazards available for people to fall victim to, then of course you have to accept liability for that.
Look and see if guardrails are missing, or the shelving isn't properly secured, compressed gas cylinders are ready to fall over.
Stock that's stored too high, shelving units that are put too close together, doors where material goes down for a minute, ends up staying there for a week.
A big fear for us is darkness and the unknown. A lot of the times tools are left, sharp objects are left on the floors. Those are very dangerous for us.
What may fail, what could fall, and from that perspective, that gives them an idea of that if it could happen, it will happen.
And it's extremely important that we know best we can what we're dealing with. The firefighters are running on an amount of air that is limited, but if we can get through the building quickly, it's going to make our job a lot easier and a lot safer.
We don't want to be the ones that discover the dangers in your workplace, right? That should be already taken care of before we have to attend.
Look around your workplace. Look at it from the perspective of them, whether it's a police officer who may be investigating a break and enter, whether it's a firefighter who could be in a fire, or in the case of our traffic safety as well. If you see an ambulance coming up behind you or any emergency services vehicle, get out of the way.
Our workplace is everywhere. As soon as we're arriving at a scene, we're planning to leave and go to a hospital. Of course, we're going to end up in the back of the ambulance sooner or later, and until we get to the hospital, that's it. That's where we are, and that's our workspace. It is the law to yield right of way to any emergency vehicle when you're sounding our lights and siren, and that's the fundamental message. We do everything we can to be seen and heard, but we can't defeat some things. We can't defeat a person who's on a cell phone. We can't defeat a person who's distracted in a vehicle who's not paying attention. You need to do what is safe when you can to allow right of way to an emergency vehicle.
Well, if our job as law enforcement officers is to protect them and protect their interests, the reality is they should take efforts to protect us while we're protecting them.
We have every intention to probably clean up after ourselves or make something safe, but as our day goes on, we're distracted, we're pulled another direction, and things get away from us.
People can be naive to the dangers that their businesses or even their own homes present to emergency services workers.
Let a child walk through the building and you wanted to prevent something from happening. That's kind of the level when we're dealing with things in the dark. We need lighting, we need railings, we need proper workplace safety to be in effect.
I think often they feel that they're not going to be a victim.
I believe employers and employees become complacent. Quite often I've heard, well, I've been doing it 20 years this way. Why should I change? All it takes is one.
Well, I think the message that's consistent is play by the rules. Make sure that if you're running a business that you do it as safely as you possibly can for the public and for your employees, and then of course for the services that may have to respond.
It's about constant assessment of the environment that you're working in.
If we're lifting a patient, moving a patient, doing anything like that, we have hands on a patient. If they're injured under our care, we've done them those services.
What we're doing with the Memorial Fund and all the work that we're doing is for the living, and we're trying to create safer workplaces, whether it's buildings or roads or whatever, for people who are out there every day, doing their emergency services work.
We need to work together to ensure that this happens. We're all on the same side.
It's a heck of a lot easier to take a quick look around your workplace, make those changes to make it safer for everyone than it is to have the death of a police officer on your hands, or in my case, to have to live with losing my husband and my soulmate for the rest of my life.
So can I ask you this? Do you think that from your perspective in the places that you work, that there's an opportunity to show that video for 10 minutes? Because there's one thing I know, I don't know about you and your work, but I know in my work, we'll go to conferences and we'll hear people talk. We'll go, yeah, that's awesome. And then we go back to our work area and we just get so engrossed and we're so busy with what we do that we forget, or we forget to pass it along. Really what we want to do is I want to make sure that nobody else has to go to another funeral for something like this. Does that make sense? Okay, thank you very much.